I'm Callista.
And I'm Teresa, and this is Terrifyingly Typical True Crime. And we're going to be a little different. We've done quite a few episodes now, and we never really chat in the beginning. And I kind of feel like, I don't know, maybe people want to hear what we have to say. So I want to say that I'm thrilled that we are closing up the religious leaders who kill family members. It's just kind of intense.
Yeah, honestly, I found it a little less intense than the nurses, but I do hear what you mean.
Yeah, I guess I mean, it's true crime. Maybe all of it's intense.
This is a good point.
But change is good. I mean, finally, we're in Washington. I'm sure we've mentioned that we're in Washington state. And finally, I've been looking at the weather every day, and it's been in the 90s for weeks. And now I see like mid 70s. So I feel like that's a good change.
Yeah, thank God.
Some people are summer people. Are we summer people?
We are not summer people. I hate summer. I know, controversial take, but there you go.
Yeah, I'm a complete wimp about horror movies, but I do love, ghosts, pumpkins. I like the thought of spooky season. I just really can't stomach the horror stuff. I'm just like, a 7-year-old.
No, I mean, I'm not huge into the horror either, but I'm here for the fall vibes.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. And we live somewhere where there's actually, changing of seasons, obviously, where, the leaves change and it's nice. So
Yeah, I feel like rainy days are rooting weather, and that's for me.
yeah, that's true. And I used to tend to bake a lot. Don't really have any desire to do that, but I do love the whole pumpkin smells and, ginger snaps and yeah.
The spice smells are ideal.
Yeah, and they can't seem to bottle that in an appropriate candle, unfortunately.
No, they just kind of come across fakey and kind of nauseating.
Yeah, I think like lots of people like the smell of like, I don't know, cooking onions and celery and stuff. And that's not I don't love that, but I do like the spicy, sweet spicy smell.
Yes. Okay. And speaking of changes, just to address that last episode, sound quality in places wasn't how we wanted it. So we got a new cord. It should hopefully be improved, fingers crossed. And then also, in case you care, or if you don't, just fast forward me, that we got a new recording studio and I'm very excited about it because editing is easier and that is great for me who I'm not an audio engineer. So here's hoping that that comes through.
Well, you're doing an awesome job. And of course, it was my cable that had an issue. So, yeah, sorry for my quiet and our sharp voice from our last episode. And yeah, you are the one that does all the heavy lifting with the editing. So, I think anything that makes things easier and more streamlined is just going to be better.
Well, yeah, I mean, hopefully that comes through. And you did not manufacture the cord.
This is true. This is true.
Okay, well, I guess on to the episode.
Alrighty.
So, as you mentioned, we're closing the church door on our theme on religious leaders who kill family members with someone who didn't stop after murdering two of his nearest and dearest. In late November 2017, this youth minister almost single-handedly doubled the death total of Chester, Virginia, a suburb of Richmond around 20 minutes south of it. As compared to the 5 reported murders in the past 10 months, this murderous man spent his Thanksgiving evening killing the 3 other people in his home.
The holidays bring out the best and the worst in people, especially when those people happen to be related. We've all witnessed our fair share of heated arguments around the dining table. But in the close-knit Ashley Forest subdivision of Chester, one family's Thanksgiving night didn't end in an uncomfortably tense atmosphere or with pasted-on smiles. The Gattis family's holiday ended in a triple murder. Around half an hour before midnight on November 23rd, 2017, a neighbor of the Gattises heard the unmistakable sound of a gunshot. He raced out of his home to see what was going on, only to find that the Chesterfield County Police had already arrived. But that hadn't been the only gunshot to ring out that night, and by the time authorities made it to the home, it was already too late for the victims. Dispatched to the 14,900 block of Dogwood Ridge Court after a home alarm was activated at around 11:30 p.m., police found the bodies of 2 women inside the kitchen of the Gattis home, along with the body of a man in the front yard. All 3 had been shot to death by the sole person still alive on the property.
This man, who was quickly taken from his unassuming gray 2-story home in handcuffs, was 58-year-old Christopher Gattis. Christopher had just gunned down his wife, 58-year-old Jeanett Gattis, his stepdaughter, 30-year-old Candice Kunze, and her boyfriend, 36-year-old Andrew Buthorn. In the aftermath of this brutality, neighbor Mike Brown could hardly believe that the kindly youth pastor for Grace Lutheran Church he called a friend had killed 3 people. He used to catch up with him during their backyard cookouts. The couple across from the Gattises, Larry and Denise Patton, remembered Christopher and Jeanett as being some of the few to welcome them to the neighborhood less than 2 years earlier. During the many meals the two families had eaten together, the Pattons had never witnessed any arguments between the Gattises. Such a savage slaying in their suburban reality was unthinkable.
Which just goes to show you, you truly never know what's going on behind the closed doors of your neighbors.
And it's a reminder that an outward display of respectability means nothing.
Exactly.
Those in Christopher's professional life were similarly stunned. A member of Grace Lutheran Church on nearby Harrogate Road remembered Christopher's devotion to his role as a middle school and high school youth ministries coordinator. Not far from the family-run store, Lighthouse Furniture in Petersburg, Christopher had been the youth ministry director at Grace Lutheran since July 2014 and had even been at the church for their Thanksgiving feast earlier in the day. Shocked as they were after learning of Christopher's crimes, the church suspended Christopher without pay days later on November 27th.
Is that supposed to be quick?
Loath as I am to defend them, his first arraignment wasn't until the 27th, which was a Monday, and I assume when the church resumed its business after the holiday weekend, so I can somewhat see why there was a delay.
Okay, got it. That does make sense. As surprised as those around him were, this wasn't Christopher's first run in with the law. While his past transgressions were a far cry from this Thanksgiving tragedy, they still tell a story of a pastor perched on a precarious edge. And when he fell, he made sure to take 3 people down with him. But Jeanett had no way of knowing what would later befell her when she reconnected with Christopher. Born on July 16, 1959, in Fort Hood, Texas, to Art and Wilma Lau, her family's German heritage played a role in their Lutheran faith. After she graduated from Colonial Heights High School, Jeanett studied at the College of William and Mary. Her relationship with Christopher was described as opposites attract, due to Christopher's quiet nature as opposed to Jeanett's extroverted and fun-loving personality. Different as they were, there was no denying their shared past. They had both received their diplomas from Colonial Heights High School in 1977, but their relationship only began after they met up at a family reunion in the 2000s.
Their paths may have diverged for a time after high school as Christopher went off to Virginia State University, then to pursue a career in the church, but their faith seemed to provide further common ground. An accountant at Napier Realtors for 15 years, Jeanett became very involved in Grace Lutheran Church, sitting on several committees and on the church council. But even though a photo of Christopher and Jeanett embracing and smiling at their 40th high school reunion only months before the murders seemed to encapsulate the loving relationship outsiders thought they had, their nearly 10-year-long marriage had seen its fair share of problems. Although Christopher later quit drinking, before he did, he was charged with the misdemeanor of public intoxication in 2010. Maybe this was a wake-up call for Christopher that contributed to him giving up alcohol, but then again, maybe not, since this charge was later waived after he paid a $25 fine. Christopher, it seemed, had a habit of getting out of trouble because 2 years later, in 2012, he was charged with the assault of newspaper delivery man Kevin DeFord, yet this charge was also dismissed.
Kevin and his 19-year-old son had been delivering copies of the Richmond Times-Dispatch on September 5, 2012, when Kevin's son threw one of the newspapers into the Gattis' driveway. The father and son made their way down the cul-de-sac at the end of Dogwood Bridge Court, then turned around to go to the next street. It was as they were coming back up the road past the Gattis home that Christopher, who had been cleaning up the leaves from his yard, abruptly abandoned his task, took the paper, rushed into the middle of the street to stand in front of Kevin's car. Then he threw the newspaper through the open window into Kevin's face. When Kevin's son got out of the vehicle to defend his father, Christopher started shouting and took out a box cutter. Worried for his son's safety, now that this agitated man had flashed a weapon, Kevin didn't trust that Christopher would calm down simply because his son held up his hands and backed away. So he called the police. Even though Christopher was found guilty of misdemeanor assault in General District Court for throwing a newspaper at Kevin's face, the charge was dismissed after Christopher appealed to circuit court, paid Kevin less than $1,000, and apologized to him. He also later admitted that his emotions were heightened that day because he had recently received a concerning test result and was waiting for his doctor to ring them about a new one. Geez, what a completely inappropriate response. Isn't that how all newspapers are delivered, by throwing them into the driveway? I mean, I'm not sure what other punishment there should have been, but when someone is unable to regulate their emotions because of some bad news, that's a problem.
It's definitely a problem, all right. And I don't know, can't the court order anger management classes or something?
Yeah, I mean, I have certainly heard of that, but maybe it's up to the jurisdiction. Maybe every court doesn't have that option.
That's a good point. That might not be the case everywhere. Including this alarming episode, police had been called to the house Christopher and Jeanett lived in 5 separate times since 2009. None of these calls, which included an alarm malfunction, a disturbance, and an illegal burn, resulted in an official report. That report would only be filed in 2017, after 3 people had been murdered.
It seems Christopher has some anger issues, and following rules doesn't seem to be his jam.
Nor does, spoiler, taking accountability for his actions. When it came to the 2 other people in the house, neither had been living there for long. Candice, or Candy Kunze, had only come back from Oregon with her boyfriend Andrew around 6 weeks ago to stay with her mother and Christopher before the young couple moved again for work. Candy had graduated from the Doctor of Physical Therapy program at Radford University in 2016. And after working for Oregon Medical Group until the end of March 2017, then transferring to a similar role in Grants Pass, Candy began working as a travel physical therapist for AMN Healthcare at the end of May. One of her friends from graduate school remembered her love of travel that led to her later career choice, the bubbly personality she had inherited from her mom, and her kind-hearted nature. As for the family dynamics, Jacqueline Powell, another former graduate student, couldn't ever remember Candy complaining about her stepfather. In a classic example of pictures being an often inaccurate snapshot in time, Jacqueline remembered the many photos of the family happily spending time together while cooking.
Candy's boyfriend, Andrew Buthorn, also became a travel physical therapist, even though his childhood interests fell outside of this field. Born in Olympia, Washington on March 18, 1981, Andrew grew up with his mother Nancy, father Bill, older brother Jess, and extended family. Baptized at St. Michael Catholic Church, Andrew graduated from Olympia High School in 1999. Andrew had loved history since he was a kid and would often read textbooks on the subject in his spare time. He became a Civil War buff who fittingly majored in history at Arlington, Virginia's Marymount University. Just as he used his time at college to pursue his childhood passion for history, he continued with an old hobby by playing college golf. After he got his degree, Andrew returned to Washington to work in Seattle. Beyond his passion for learning about those who came before him, Andrew had always wanted to help people. So he chose to switch tracks and became a physical therapist. After graduating from the University of Puget Sound in Tacoma, Washington, he relocated to Eugene, Oregon for his first physical therapist job.
Despite his family's desire for Andrew to move closer to them, it was during the 2.5 years that Andrew was living in Eugene that he ran into Candy while they were both attending a continuing education workshop in 2016. They didn't become a couple in the first few months after meeting, but in March 2017, the two officially became an item. The 2 outgoing physical therapists seemed like a good match, And after getting to know Candy, Andrew's entire family grew to enjoy her company. It was with heavy hearts that they said goodbye to the pair when they set out for Virginia in September 2017 to find new jobs and continue their traveling physical therapy practice. They had been living with Christopher and Jeanett in Chester for nearly 2 weeks when Andrew received a job offer from a Winchester nursing home. On Thanksgiving Day, Andrew headed back to Chester to spend the holiday with Candy's family, but still rang his own family to say everything was going well. He didn't mention having any problems with the Gattises and even described how he had been helping them by painting their fence. With their own winter home in Arizona, Andrew's parents, Nancy and Bill, were thrilled to learn about Andrew and Candy's plan to sign a short term contract for physical therapist positions in Yuma, Arizona. The couple's stay in Virginia before this next move was so short lived that their cars still had Oregon license plates on them.
But as we've seen before, things can escalate quickly. And over the past few weeks, there had been a series of arguments that culminated in a fatal fight on Thanksgiving night. 2 days before the triple murder, Christopher had started an argument over spilled wine during a family board game. Christopher, who had fallen off the wagon, pushed Jeanett in an alcohol fueled rage and reportedly would have punched her if his visiting nephew hadn't intervened and calmed him down. Jeanett had recorded several of these fights and had gone to Christopher's adult nephew on her own later that evening. She had brought one of Christopher's guns downstairs with her after their argument and asked his nephew, who was staying the night at their house, to take the gun and keep it away from Christopher, for fear he would soon find a use for it. Christopher didn't want Candy and Andrew staying with them. He wasn't particularly fond of any of Jeanett's children and didn't want to see them for more than a couple of days per visit. In the 48 hours that followed him pushing his wife, Christopher's resentment had been steadily ratcheting up, and it reached a breaking point around 6 in the evening on November 23rd, 2017. Home surveillance camera footage recorded Christopher accosting Candy and Andrew while they were sitting in the backyard hot tub. Like an angry schoolmarm, Christopher shook his finger at the pair as he ordered them to leave. Jeanett managed to pull her husband away while recording the confrontation on her phone. With the phone still recording, it captured the married couple's harsh words as Christopher stalked off. It seems like he is just always on the edge and is an ass to be around. Adding guns and alcohol to that mix just made things so much worse.
Yeah, the pair are notorious for adding fuel to the fire. Bar fights are common for a reason.
Yup.
Tragically, that Thanksgiving night progressed from bad to far, far worse. But Christopher didn't just snap. Oh no, he had a whole story of self-defense he needed to sell. At 9:40 that evening, he texted Jeanett about how scared he was of her. He begged her to stop threatening him and pleaded for his life. This message was followed by two more over the following 13 minutes, in which he asked her to stop saying she wanted to kill him and reiterated how afraid, because afraid apparently sounds like it has an E in it.
That made me chuckle, obviously.
There's so much SMH right now. At 9:58, less than 20 minutes after his first text, he sent, "You're hurting me," with several exclamation marks and the incorrect possessive form of the word instead of the contraction of "you are." Then at 10:10, he asked Jeanett not to come and hurt him in his room.
What kind of BS is this? I mean, it sounds like Jeanett had been recording his outbursts and behavior on several different occasions. Did he really think this bullshit was gonna fly? It's so lame.
It is, but I guess, like they always are, Christopher's apparently sure that his narrative with this manufactured digital evidence is the one that will be believed.
Yeah. Are all criminals ever not narcissists?
I'm sure there has to be a few who aren't, but it does seem like the majority definitely are.
Yeah.
Likely not helped by the 3 drinks Christopher had consumed, the strange, error-filled texts kept lighting up Jeanett's phone. When, at 10:27, he wrote, "Please don't come after me. Thanks." Followed 3 minutes later by, "You want to hurt me. I'm so scared. You and Candy want to kill me," with "you" capitalized and "Candy" uncapitalized, And I'm not here to criticize anyone for ignoring the rules of grammar and spelling when sending off a quick text. Everybody does it. But Christopher murdered 3 people, so I'm perfectly fine with dragging him a bit.
And I love you for it.
Thanks for that. Also, because I couldn't find any mention of mental health problems, I think these texts just epitomize the shit job he did in attempting to stage the murders as self defense. I mean, he's not asking for someone to get back to him by the end of the day. What's up with the thanks for agreeing not to come after him?
Yeah, I did the same thing. It's a weird addition.
Right?
Appropriately concerned, Jeanette chose to text the same nephew she had given one of her husband's guns to 2 days earlier. At 10:48, 18 minutes after Christopher's last text, Jeanette shrewdly said, "He's over the edge. We have left him alone. We'll send you his last text. I think he's doing mind games." Christopher's nephew replied at 10:57, "What in the world? Please be careful. I don't know what he's doing, but I think you two should stay somewhere else if you can." Minutes after that, he sent a follow up message in which he commented on the strangeness of Christopher's text and added, "I don't believe he's scared at all. I don't know why he would say that. I won't message him. For Candy, Andrew, and your sake, I really think you two should stay somewhere else." Christopher's nephew was so fed up with his uncle's odd messages that at 11:06 he told Jeanette, "The more I learn about my family on that side, the less I want anything to do with it."
Which does make you wonder about Christopher's close relations, but I don't think he meant they were also prone to murder, just that they too had issues.
Yeah, sounds like it. And it's sad that Jeanette, Candy, and Andrew weren't able to heed his advice.
It really is.
Sadly, by the time Jeanette's phone pinged once again with a text notification, this time about the home security alarm having been activated at 11:27, Christopher had been too busy to text, and Jeanette was in no position to read it.
That's because at around 11:15, Christopher grabbed his Taurus .45 caliber from upstairs. He came back down to interrupt the board game Jeanette, Candy, and Andrew were playing in the kitchen by firing each of the 11 rounds in his semi-automatic pistol, brutally murdering all 3 without ever needing to turn to the other 2 fully loaded magazines on the kitchen floor and in his pocket.
Tell me again why we need access to semi automatic weapons?
You know you're asking the wrong person because I can't think of a single reason why civilians should be able to purchase them at the freaking grocery store.
I mean, I'm just shaking my head at the ridiculousness of that fact.
I'm shaking my head with you. Christopher killed Jeanette first, then he went after Candy and Andrew. Candy's phone recorded her stepfather walking into the kitchen with his pistol and fatally shooting her. It also captured a glimpse of Andrew once he was cornered and attempting to hide behind a table. Andrew promised to give Christopher what he said he wanted by leaving the home. But Christopher was deaf to both his pleas and the screams around him. Andrew attempted to bolt from the house, but Christopher managed to fire 3 bullets into him. As he struggled to escape with his grave injuries, Andrew set off the home alarm. Perhaps knowing it was all over, authorities were surely already on their way. Christopher left the pistol in the house and called their alarm company, asking for them to send police without providing a reason why.
First to arrive on the scene, Officer Fraser of the Chesterfield County Police pulled up to the Gattis home around 11:30, only minutes after the burglar alarm went off. He walked past Andrew's body in the front yard, saw the 2 gunshots to his stomach, then 3 feet behind Andrew's still form, he discovered Christopher, sitting on the front steps to the porch beneath a cheery welcome sign. With his body-worn camera recording, Officer Fraser started questioning Christopher to try and understand what had happened. Christopher told Officer Fraser that he had shot 3 people, all of whom were most likely dead. He defended this decision by explaining that Andrew had threatened to kill him. Upon being pressed further, both figuratively and literally, since Officer Fraser unholstered his gun and instructed the murder suspect to lie on the ground, Christopher said that he had been consistently receiving threats for the past few days. Officer Fraser wasn't alone with the suspect and his shaky story for long. The sounds of sirens pierced the night as a multitude of officers and paramedics descended upon the scene. While numerous officers checked each room of the house for more victims or assailants, one officer spoke to Andrew again and again, trying to get him to respond. When he never did, he was declared dead at the scene. Authorities would soon learn that Christopher had taken the lives of 3 people. Christopher, though, maintained that he had killed Jeanett, Candy, and Andrew in self defense after they all ganged up on me.
Unsurprisingly, the autopsies didn't match up with Christopher's convenient claim. The state office of the chief medical examiner determined that all 3 had died from fatal gunshot wounds to the back, and each death was classified as a homicide. Even if Christopher hoped to somehow suggest that his victims posed a threat to him while they were facing away from him, it was clear that he hadn't been shooting to wound and incapacitate his supposed assailants. Jeanett was killed from a single gunshot wound to the back. Candy had been shot several times in the chest, upper torso, back, and right thigh. And Andrew had gunshots to his stomach and back. Arrested at his home, Christopher was charged with 3 counts of first-degree murder and 3 counts of the use of a firearm in the commission of a felony. First held without bail in the Chesterfield County Jail, Christopher was then detained at Riverside Regional Jail on suicide watch without bond. And as a short side note here, for those who also can't let anything go, here's the difference between bail and bond.
So, we all know that bail is set to ensure that the defendant doesn't do a runner if they're released from jail in the lead up to their trial. The bail most of us are familiar with is cash bail, where the defendant pays the amount specified by the judge. However, the person could also be released on their own recognizance, meaning that they just promise to show up at court. There are also unsecured bonds where the person doesn't pay anything initially, but will have to cough up the agreed upon amount if they don't show up. When money is involved and the defendant can't pay the amount, they can hire a bail bond company for a fee, and in return, that company agrees to post the full bail amount if the defendant doesn't appear in court. Then, Dog the bounty hunter or someone similarly problematic chases them down along with the police. And I can just picture his long hair, real hair, fake hair, whatever. I can just picture that. Anywho,
He's a
but
scary dude.
yeah, definitely. I think that's the point, but definitely. But back to Christopher. He appeared by video in court from Riverside Regional Jail for the first time on November 27, 2017, 4 days after he was arrested. Following his arraignment for Andrew Buthorn's murder in Chesterfield General District Court, Christopher attended his second arraignment in juvenile and domestic relations that same day for the murders of Jeanett Gattis and Candice Kunze. In response to his question about why he was appearing in 2 different courts, it was explained that because he was not a family member, Andrew's death fell outside the purview of the domestic relations court. But if a grand jury certified all the charges against him and they went through the circuit court, the cases would likely be presented together.
In contrast to his strange text messages, Christopher answered both judges' questions coherently while attempting to use his cuffed hands to gesticulate. Christopher was denied bond in both courts and appointed an attorney after he said he couldn't afford one and described the $2,000 he had in savings as compared to his outgoing monthly medical expense of $300. After a domestic relations court judge certified 2 counts of first-degree murder and felony use of a firearm in relation to Jeanett Gattis and Candice Kunze to a Chesterfield Circuit Court grand jury on April 10, 2018, the following day, a first-degree murder charge for the death of Andrew Buthorn was also certified by a Chesterfield General District Court judge. In the wake of the murders, a well-attended celebration of life was held for Jeanett and Candice on December 2017, at Grace Lutheran Church. And friends created a GoFundMe page to help Jeanett's son and Candy's younger brother, Adam Kunze, who lived in Los Angeles at the time of their deaths, with funeral expenses.
Andrew's funeral, which was held on the same day, was no less crowded, with over 500 mourners attending the service at St. Michael Catholic Church, the same holy site in which young Andrew had been baptized. Former physical therapist patients even got in contact with his family to describe the pivotal part Andrew played in their recovery. When it came time for their killer to face justice, Christopher avoided the planned 3-day jury trial to be held in early November 2018, nearly a year after that fateful night, by agreeing to a weeks old plea deal. And on August 15th, 2018, 59-year-old Christopher Gattis pled guilty to 3 counts of first-degree murder and 1 count of felony use of a firearm in Chesterfield Circuit Court. As part of prosecutor Kenneth Chitty's summary of evidence, recordings from Jeanett's cell phone of the altercations prior to the murders were shown in the courtroom.
On the other side of that courtroom, Christopher's defense attorney, John Rock Charlie, produced a photograph of the bruises on Christopher's chest that he said Jeanett caused during their fight 2 days before Thanksgiving. He also said that after his client accosted Candy and Andrew in the hot tub and ordered them to leave on November 23rd, Christopher went upstairs to his bedroom and heard them criticizing him through the open window. In contrast to the prosecution's narrative that Christopher's rage had been boiling away over the 2 days before Thanksgiving, his lawyer said his appeals for Candy and Andrew to go were made in an effort to avoid a climactic confrontation. He offered a text Christopher sent to Andrew that said, "I'm sorry you stepped into a bad situation," as proof of Christopher's restrained requests. In a final bid to reduce his sentence, John Rock Charlie announced his client's intent to minister to his fellow prisoners as he atoned for his crimes.
I mean, just like Stephen Allwine, is that supposed to be seen as something positive as opposed to a threat?
I guess, although I somewhat lean towards taking it as a bid to become a cult leader in prison.
I mean, with a captive audience.
True.
After both sides had their say and Christopher accepted the plea agreement, Chesterfield Circuit Judge David E. Johnson sentenced him to a prison term of 100 years for each murder charge. 45 years were suspended on each of the 3 counts, and Christopher's 3 55-year sentences were to be served concurrently, with another 3 years for the use of a firearm. This all added up to an active sentence of 58 years, the same age Jeanett was at the time of her murder. Considering that parole hasn't been an option for those convicted of felonies in Virginia since 1995, this translates to a life term. Thank God.
Yeah,
Since Andrew's death, his family has become close to Candy's biological father, Holger Kunze. Oh my gosh, I love that name.
you do.
Yeah. Predicting that Andrew and Candy would have eventually gotten married, the Kunzes and Buthorns feel like family. Jeanett's son and Candace's younger brother Adam Kunze spoke for most of them when he expressed his satisfaction with the sentence Christopher Gattis received. And I love that the families became close because who else is going to truly understand their shared tragedy?
Me too. I hope that offers them some kind of comfort.
Yeah. Currently incarcerated at Buckingham Correctional Center, 66-year-old Christopher has only served 6 years and 8 months of his sentence and won't be eligible for release until 2067, when he'd be around 108. Since his latest application for geriatric parole was denied in August 2024 due to the seriousness of his crimes, murdering 3 people because he wanted 2 of them out of the house, it's unlikely he'll ever walk out of prison as a free man.
And because this is our last religious leader, we thought we'd offer a few opinions. Most of the men we've talked about kill their wives instead of getting divorced. And first, let's acknowledge that the vast majority of religious leaders do not see murder as a viable end to a marriage. But, as we've seen with men from various faiths, when both parties leaving the relationship alive via divorce isn't an option if the religious leader wants to maintain their standing, it makes murder that much more appealing and easier to rationalize. We've also encountered cases in which the fact that the killer is a religious leader is used in their defense. Some couldn't wrap their heads around a man of God killing someone because, as we all know, no one has ever used a position of power for evil or presented a different face in public than in private. Don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that religion can't be associated with positive outcomes. Lots of charities, for instance, have religious roots. I just don't think we can say any position of trust is free of predators. And in my opinion, going into any relationship with blind faith seems dangerous.
You know, I completely agree with you. I think in life there are lots of absolutes. Things like don't commit murder seems the most obvious, along with treating people the way you want to be treated. However, I think telling congregants that divorce is not an option can only lead to potential harm. Again, most people are not going to choose murder, but leading with openness and compassion seems like a better way to foster your community.
I'm with you. You can never know what someone's specific situation is like, so trying to understand it rather than making sweeping statements seems like the way to go.
I mean, let's make that a life rule.
We'll get it on a t shirt. Next week, we'll be back with part two of our theme on female killer nurses when we discuss the case of Janine Hanna.
All the sources we used for this episode are in the show notes below. If you'd like to suggest a case or theme for us to discuss, feel free to email us at terrifyinglytypicalpodcast@gmail.com. You can also follow us at Terrifyingly Typical Podcast on Instagram and at Terrifyingly Typical Pod on TikTok. Leave us a comment below to let us know what you thought of the case. We'd love to hear your opinions.
See you next week.